This is the
Five Starr
Podcast.
Let me talk to you. Hi. What do you guys want to talk about? Thanks, guys. Back to you.
It's crazy. I never thought I'd drink as much water as I actually do. I just bought one of those 2-gallon jugs a week ago. Now I'm down to like a quarter of the jug. I mean, I do usually drink from tumblers, but I just never thought much about it. But I do love my water. Just plain old boring water. With the occasional ice cube. No lemon. I'm allergic. So, what's going on with you guys? Hope everyone's doing well. It is, well, the world is about to be set ablaze in the next 7 days. Not that I'm inciting anything. I'm just, kind of expecting the pandemonium. Stay safe. Wherever you are. There's a lot of nutballs out there. So we're going to cover all the territory stuff, as we normally do on the Friday show. Oh, by the way, welcome to the Five Starr Wrestling Report. It's the wrestling podcast nobody knows but everybody needs. Here on YouTube and Rumble Mondays and Fridays. Make sure you comment, like, subscribe. I'm trying to pre-plan for this coming weekend because, I'm actually going back to Pittsburgh to do some stuff. Trying to figure out when I'm going to actually have time to fit the recording schedule in. I know there's a WWE PLE that we need to cover, along with Retro Raw. But when I looked at that Crown Jewel card on Monday, there were a good handful of matches on there. So I'm thinking that might be a longer show than normal. I also don't know what start time is. It's international, so I'm assuming it's going to be one of those mid-afternoon events. Which could be good. It's just a matter of working out the logistics. But we should have a normal Monday show in terms of upload time and all that stuff. So, with that, let's see what we got booked on the agenda for today's show. Guess we'll start with Crockett Television as we always do. I just need to flip to my notes here because I'm very disorganized today for whatever reason. All right. So we're in for a short one this week. Runtime on this bad boy was something like 42 minutes. And to be honest, there really wasn't much to cover this week aside from more of the continuation on the Road Warriors heel turn. Plus a couple things with the Varsity Club. Meanwhile, we're approximately 3 days and counting away from the official launch of the Turner sale. They are meticulously trying to keep that news under the radar. But they are promoting the Midsouth tour coming up in Alexandria, Louisiana, and New Orleans. Everything's great. Company's on fire. They're financially in the hole. But by cracky, nostalgia, baby. Can't wait to bring that NWA product to the old Midsouth area. The fans are starved for wrestling action. And of course, nobody knows the Midsouth area better than James Z. Cornette and the Midnight Express. They happen to be in the opener this week against Mike Justice and Dave Isley. I was digging the lavender-colored gear with Bobby and Stan this time. I don't think I've seen them break out that color scheme yet. They've been wearing a lot of yellow for the last few months. Yellow and pink seems to be their go-to colors. But the lavender look kind of neat. Especially Stan's trunks. Of course, I'm mainly paying attention to Cornette's banter with the announcers. So that's the majority of where my note-taking is for this match here. Immediately in the first 30 seconds, Corny's talking about how the Midnights are going to fill the seats in the Municipal Auditorium in downtown New Orleans. He goes, "Ain't that right, Tony?" There's a 5-second pause. Tony just goes, "Yes." To which JR interjects with, "He's just full of words, ain't he?" Let the record show, the year was 1988 when Tony Schiavone had completely given up trying. People often like to think Tony gave up during the dying days of Nitro. Oh, how those people were wrong. Though I promise you, Tony had given up well before the Monday Night Wars ever kicked off. I also liked hearing Cornette compare Oliver Humperdinck to Foghorn Leghorn. There was one spot in this match I noted. It was Isley fucking up an arm drag on Stan Lane so poorly. Stan immediately no-sold it and super kicked him in the stomach. Normally I would complain about shit like that. But, it was a pretty goddamn repulsive arm drag. I also noted the finish where Cornette referred to Bobby Eaton's leg drop as, quote, "the Bobby Eaton flying hemorrhoid hop guillotine," which JR initialed the BEFHQHOH4. Yeah, that name did not stick. So then Cornette did a promo, essentially on the fans, and he actually brought up a valid point here. He said, people often criticize the Midnights for cheating. The problem is that if the Midnights didn't cheat, then their opponents would. So they beat them to the punch. Why is it no other heel in wrestling ever came up with that excuse to cheat? At least that shit makes sense. So we also talked about the Road Warriors. Said the Midnights will do anything to keep their World Tag Belts. They have the advantage, though, because if the Road Warriors want to become the champions, they have to beat the Midnight Express. But all Bobby and Stan have to do is survive. But as long as there's breath in the three of them, they'll be damned to see Hawk and Animal walk away as the new champions. So this was a babyface promo, correct? I know that's sort of the unanswered question with the Midnight Express throughout the fall of '88. Are they faces? Are they heels? Are they a mixture of both depending on the situation? Well, the answer is nobody really knows. But they're obviously way too cool to hate. So the people are going to cheer them regardless. Kind of like the Horsemen. So then we came back from break for, to my utter surprise, gorgeous Jimmy Garvin. Holy shit, he did come back before the Freebirds run. Garvin was here in the flesh to do a promo. Now, granted, he was on a crutch. It's not like he was wrestling this week. But he thanked the doctor that did the operation on his knee. Thanked all the fans that supported him along the way. Said he's got way too much fight in him to sit on the sidelines. It runs in the family. And, well, Eddie Gilbert was there too. He took over and warned the Varsity Club that he and Garvin are ready to fight whenever Kevin Sullivan has the guts to step up. At the same time, he's also claiming that Sullivan's been screwing Rick Steiner over on checks. So whenever Steiner looks at his bank account and realizes that he's getting ripped off, he'll be coming back to Gilbert and Garvin's neck of the woods. Curious question. How exactly is Sullivan cashing Steiner's checks without his signature? Is he forging Steiner's signature? Something tells me Steiner's bank would have probably put a freeze on those checks. Little suspicious activity going on there. I also loved here at the end, Gilbert takes a shot at Mike Rotunda and says, he can't call himself the greatest TV champ when he never defends the belt against anybody. Told you David Crockett just goes, do you know that's true? Didn't Rotunda defend the belt the other week? Yeah, I know they were doing that story for a while where Steiner was defending the belt on behalf of Rotunda because he was too lazy to defend it himself, but I mean, it's not like we haven't seen Rotunda defend the belt. He just did 7 days ago. In any case. Well, then Gilbert wrestled Tommy Angel. This is actually where I noticed Gilbert's tights. It kind of resembled those ugly half tights we've seen guys wear over the years. Or like one half of the tights are short so we see the exposed leg. And the other is essentially a long pant leg. This wasn't even that. It looked like Gilbert tore his right pant leg, but he didn't have another pair of tights in a gym bag or something like that. Looks horrible. It was like a wardrobe malfunction. So Gilbert did some stuff for a while. Garvin got involved on the floor and kind of helped out while Gilbert took Teddy Long in the corner. And then they do a spot where Angel thought he dodged the axe handle, but Gilbert had him scouted. So then Angel charged Gilbert and ate a stun gun for the 3. Kind of unique little finish. I don't know how long Garvin is on the crutches for. I'm still not convinced we actually see him and Eddie go up against the Varsity Club at any point. But we'll see as we transition into the new regime. It is entirely possible they just dropped this angle and forgot all about it. And then we came back for a promo with Foghorn Leghorn. Sir Oliver Humperdinck. Here's everything I wrote down. Humperdinck says that Jim Cornette is the only guy that makes George Bush look macho. Complete silence for that comment. I'm thinking the Georgia studio crowd was not really up for Republican pot shots. See the results of the 1988 election. And then he talked about Bam Bam. Pretty sure they just showed the exact same video package of him squashing George South like they did the other week. He talked more about Ric Flair and Barry Windham. It's literally the same shit we've been hearing for weeks now. Nothing further to add. Then we had Barry Windham versus Bob Riddle. Windham won with a lariat in a match that realistically probably only went about 3 minutes. In my mind, it had to have gone 3 hours. I mean, I spaced out like 4 times during this thing. I also kind of spaced out on J.J. Dillon and Barry Windham's promo afterwards. Again, they're still pushing the narrative here that Barry doesn't owe Dusty Rhodes a U.S. title match. At the same time, JJ's talking about how the promoters are kind of putting his and Barry's back against the wall, offering big money contracts for Barry to put his strap up against guys like Dusty and Bam Bam, considering that all of the other key challenges are currently occupied with other stuff at the moment. Sting, Luger, the Koloffs. It may be in their best interest to entertain the idea of Barry versus Bam Bam, or Barry versus Dusty for the strap. But then Barry concludes by saying that he might consider a title match with Dusty or Bam Bam, but it's going to be on his terms. And either way, he's not losing the U.S. title anytime soon. You know, credit where it's due. At least they're bothering to explain why JJ is refusing to sign contracts for a match with Dusty. Mainly in that Barry's already beaten Dusty for the belt. So in his mind, he has nothing left to prove. Although the big money contracts are tempting. Since we all know the Horsemen love that green stuff. At the end of the day, though, and we know what the Starrcade match is going to be anyway. I think the stuff with Dusty is probably just all spot show or live event promotion. And that brought us to the Fantastics versus Jerry Price and Mike Jackson. Some really fun back and forth with Jackson and Fulton early on here. It was almost as great as watching Jackson work with Beautiful Bobby. And that wasn't even the best part of the match. There's a spot here where Rogers is working over Price. Out of the corner of his eye, he sees a handful of fans walking over to ringside. So Rogers just lets go of Price so he can then walk over to shake their hands. Because if there's one thing we know about the Fantastics, they will never pass up on a meet and greet opportunity. That was so awesome. He just broke a chain hold so he could go over and greet some fans. Then Jerry Price gets up and he's like, "Oh, okay, no problem. That's cool. I'll wait." Then they just go back to wrestling again. And then the Fantastics went over with the assisted senton. Then they did a promo attempting to hype the U.S. Tag Title Tournament. The key word is attempt. This was not the finest hour for Bobby Fulton and or Tommy Rogers. Bobby was fumbling all over himself here trying to cut this promo on the Sheep Herders. He got tongue-tied trying to reference the red, white, and blue, and I think he eventually just gave up. And then Tommy Rogers does the most generic white meat pro-American babyface promo of all time. I believe he inadvertently referred to the U.S. as, quote, "the home of the free and the land of the brave." Whoops. Yeah, this promo sucked. I honestly don't even know why they didn't try to do a second take on this. But coming back from break, Tony Schiavone set up the next pre-tape. Now, we've heard a lot of people talk about the Road Warriors. Everyone from Dusty to Luger to even the Road Warriors themselves. The one guy we have not heard comment on the situation, the victim in the whole attack, the Stinger. So we pitch to a tape where Sting is sitting in front of a monitor with a neck brace on, basically reliving and recounting the angle in real time. And he, well, to put it bluntly, he did his best to angrily respond to the situation. He was not going to win an Oscar for his performance here, but, he got the point across. Talked about how they used to be referred to as the Brothers in Paint, but all of that went out the window in Virginia. Whether that was for money, greed, ego investment, none of it really matters. He actually brought up a good point here, too. Talking about how they intentionally prevented Sting from getting involved in the entire match. Well, they didn't want Sting to get involved. If they wanted to go it alone and handle the business themselves, well, they should have just told that to Sting before the bell rang. Sting would have gladly stepped aside and let the Road Warriors do their thing. No disrespect. But they took the coward's way out. And now Sting and Luger are negotiating their revenge plan. And, well, then they just sort of cut the clip mid-sentence. So we didn't really hear Sting finish his thought. At which point we pitch back to the studio where Tony's talking with Luger. Luger was wearing the patented wife beater this week. So it kind of got the people wondering if we were going to see some man pecs. But nah. Luger was too serious to reveal the goods. Not this week. 364 days out of the year, most definitely. Not today. He talked about how he understands the pain Sting is going through. Brought Luger back to a time last year when he and Barry Windham won the U.S. tag titles. And Luger thought they were on top of the world. Turns out Barry had his own agenda in mind. A few weeks later, he was aligned with the Horsemen. But he said that Sting's recovering, and he's going to need to be 100% in order to take down the Road Warriors. And Luger will be right there by his side to help him take down the bad guys. They could paint up their faces, shave their heads, wear their spikes. But none of it's going to help them when they're standing across the ring from two pissed-off men with a chip on their shoulder. And you know, all things considered, this is actually a pretty damn good Luger promo. Normally I'm one to kind of space out on Luger promos. A lot of them just drone on forever and never get to a point. But no, he was actually really good here. Kind of got me wondering about a few things. You know, when you consider the landscape of the Starrcade card, got me thinking how better off it would have been if maybe they would do Sting and Luger versus the Road Warriors at Starrcade in December instead of Sting and Dusty. Because I keep talking about how cold Luger's been since the Great American Bash fallout with Flair. You listen to him during this promo here, you actually heard a few fans rally behind him. Especially when he's talking about having Sting's back and wanting to be a good friend. Maybe they could have gotten back some of that lost momentum if they'd have reconsidered Flair's opponent for Starrcade. Instead of rematching him with Luger, which, I mean, let's be honest, nobody really gave a shit about. Maybe they could have just done Bam Bam. Then have Barry wrestle Dusty or something like that. I'm starting to wonder how they did end up finalizing that Starrcade card. Really kind of seems like there was a decent amount of reshuffling going on. Because you think about all the feuds they've been building up on television, realistically, we're only about, 2 months away from that pay-per-view? A lot of those matches had virtually nothing to do with what they're building up on TV right now. Just pointing it out. It's all hypothetical now, but I don't know, it's kind of fun playing fantasy booker. Or even talking about what-if scenarios had things kind of played out in different ways. Who knows? So with that, we had Mike Rotunda and Rick Steiner going up against the Holiday Brothers. I'm still not convinced that Brad and Brett Holiday are actual brothers. I've been watching these guys for weeks now. They look nothing alike. I honestly couldn't tell what was more fun here. Watching Rick power up that fat-ass brother over his shoulder and then ram him into the corner, or him recklessly throwing the other brother around and nearly dropping him right on his neck with a German suplex. God, I could watch Steiner beat up people for hours. And obviously the story here is Rotunda once again kind of hogging the spotlight and picking up the win with a butterfly after he basically tagged himself in and told Steiner to fuck off. And then Rick comes in afterwards and covers the dead brother for a 3 count anyway. Because he wants the credit. He did do all the work. Not really much in terms of story advancement, but again, the people are into Rick Steiner. Kind of an abrupt ending to the show, too, after that. Because they showed a quick replay of Rotunda getting the win, and then they immediately started plugging the college scoreboard. I mean, I did say it was a shorter episode this week. There's really not a whole lot going on in general. And just kind of looking at the timeline, too. There's still a ways out for that next Clash event. I'm sure that was the thing the boys were complaining about at the time. Like, why the fuck are we pushing Starrcade to December this year instead of just keeping it in the November time slot? It's all part of that new regime change. I mean, it was kind of stupid if you think about it, because I basically left the entire month of November open with no major pay-per-views or Clash events. Seemed like a lot of dead air time. I mean, Christ, they've already been beating a dead horse with a lot of the main feuds. Varsity Club breakup, Luger and Flair, the Russians and the Koloffs. I mean, really, the only feud they haven't started promoting yet is the Midnights versus Original Midnights feud with Paul Lee. And that's coming up soon. Really soon, in fact. Because the Midnights are about to drop the World Tag Titles to the Road Warriors, and I think they end up shooting that angle with Paul Heyman on the very next show. But God, I think we got another 2 months, basically, of Varsity Club drama and Luger calling out Flair on television. Something tells me that's going to get old real fast. Well, I am running a little low on water here, so let's see if we can pull through. 2 reviews left. Can I make it? We'll see if my voice holds up. Now, before we get to talking about the juicy details of Midsouth this week, I want to take a minute to play an audio clip here from the opening few minutes. A gospel sermon, if you will, courtesy of none other than Boyd Pierce, of all people. He had some stuff on his mind this week, and he did not hold back from letting us hear it.
Wrestling fans, welcome to this week's edition of Mid-South Wrestling Television Network. I'm your host, Boyd Pierce, and our guest commentator, Cowboy Bill Watts, has just returned from an important meeting of the Board of Directors of Mid-South Wrestling in Tampa, Florida, we have some shocking news and a landmark decision that has been made, and you'll understand it when we show you some of the things, and Bill will explain them as they come up. But I want to tell you, in over 30 years of announcing professional wrestling and being connected with this wonderful sport, 9 years right here on national TV and being with Midsouth Wrestling ever since its inception, that's the only host that it's ever had. I want to tell you something. Through those years, I have been with organizations, with federations, associations, and alliances, but I've never found one yet that had the guts, courage, or intestinal fortitude, whatever adjective you might want to add, to really carry out something, to regulate the rules and regulations of this great sport. And you all know that in our wonderful world of professional wrestling, we have contestants that goes right to the line of breaking those rules. Some of them step over and are reprimanded, but something needs to be done with teeth. And Mid-South Wrestling, my friends, has never forgotten you fans who pay and buy tickets in the arenas wherever you attend the matches, and you fans that open up your homes week after week to give us the great ratings that we have on all of our stations. Mid-South Wrestling knows that you're the reason and the backbone of their success. They'll never let you down, and when they feel like you have been cheated, they intend to do something about it. Bill?
Preach. My man, Boyd Pierce. Even Bill Watts couldn't help but crack a smile during that tangent. He looked like a proud father sitting beside Boyd, just thinking, I'm going to let this man stew. Not going to say a word. Now, of course, why all the hysteria? It's a valid question. It is very uncharacteristic of Boyd Pierce to just burst out into emotional outrage. Well, it's story time this week. Not with Adam Cole, baby. Fuck that puny twerp. It's story time with Bill Watts. So they covered a lot of ground in the opening 10 minutes this week. I could try to go bullet point by bullet point with every clip and every detail here, but I don't really know if that's necessary. I'll do my best to explain. So here's the dilemma we have right now. They open the show, and already the North American title is sitting in front and center. So the immediate question people are wondering is, well, what's going on with the title? Did Magnum relinquish the belt? Well, not exactly. So 2 weeks ago, Magnum beat Hacksaw Butch Reed for the title on television, with a little bit of assistance from JYD as the guest referee. But we all saw it. Magnum pinned Reed's shoulders down 1, 2, 3. Well, there's a problem. The original stipulation to that match was that the people would get to pick Reed's opponent, as per the contract that Mid-South had put in place for that specific match, courtesy of Charlie Lay and Grizzly Smith. But Reed managed to weasel out of that sanctioned match with JYD, despite the fans unanimously wanting him to be the opponent. And instead, Reed chose Magnum, because he figured it would be easy pickings. However, that meant the original contract had been violated. So even though Magnum technically won the match, it was not an officially sanctioned match under the guidelines of the original document. But this is where things get really dicey. Shortly after Magnum won that belt, Nikolai Volkov issued a challenge to Magnum. He wanted him to put his belt on the line in New Orleans, but that match was never sanctioned either. By the way, before I go any further, if you are following along on the timeline here and you have access to the tape library, you have to listen to Nikolai's pre-taped interviews on this episode. They had me dying of laughter. It is... I mean, he makes Nikita Koloff's broken English promo sound logical by comparison. Damn it, I should have recorded the sound bites. Totally forgot. They are brilliant. If you listen to both of them back to back, they go from somewhat comprehensible, and the more fired up Nikolai gets, the less comprehensible the promo becomes. And it just ends with him talking to like 90 miles an hour in Russian and screaming as loud as humanly possible. Honestly, I wasn't even convinced he was saying words by the end. Epic stuff. Anyway, what was I talking about? Something about New Orleans. Oh, yeah, that's right. So, yeah, even though Nikolai beat Magnum for the title, he had to shortly relinquish the belt afterwards because, well, technically Magnum wasn't certified to have that match take place. You can't do it through word of mouth. You have to get it sanctioned by the Midsouth management. So, basically, to wrap this all up, the belt is being returned to Hacksaw Reed. However, he will have to defend the belt against JYD, and there will also be a special guest referee assigned for that match, which, as of that point, had currently been kept under wraps. Even Bill Watts didn't know who it was going to be. So that's where we're at. They've basically done a convoluted roundabout timeline to get the belt back onto Hacksaw Reed. Kind of goes back to that hotshot booking conversation we had a few weeks ago. You know, right now, it's basically a case of hot potato where the title is bouncing around to like 3 different guys in the span of 2 weeks or whatever it's been. Again, personally, I'm not really a fan of doing that kind of stuff with championships, especially the more prestigious ones. But we also talked about it. Bill Watts is hot-shotting on purpose. You know, he's trying to generate buzz around the product. You obviously couldn't run a promotion like this for a whole calendar year, where you've got like 4 or 5 title switches happening in less than a month. I mean, that would completely diminish the meaning of the belt. But he is trying to get Mid-South out of this muddy puddle they've been trapped in for a while. You know, things have been pretty stale with going back to pretty much September of this year. Again, I talk about it ever since that loser leaves town match with Hacksaw Duggan and Ted DiBiase. Once DiBiase left the territory, a lot of the buzz went with it. So, again, he's trying out some ideas. You can't fault him for it. So with that in mind, well, we can talk about this Butch Reed Junkyard Dog title match. They didn't make us wait long. And our special guest referee in charge, the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes. Because who else, right? It was awesome, too, because, you know, they're really milking the big reveal. And you can hear Butch on the house mic talking smack and just being a total dirtbag. So he's bitching about the guest ref stipulation. And then you just hear him shout to JYD, "I've got 2 soup bones for you, sucker." Classic Butch Reed. That southern slang, soup bones. I love that term. I wish guys would use that today. So indeed, Dusty is here to lay out the rules, letting Hacksaw Reed know that he's the law. And if Reed fucks around with Big Dust, he'll send him to the showers. And he'll award Dog the winner via forfeit. So yeah, Dusty's not biased at all. Now, let's get the pink elephant out of the room. Yes, Dusty was involved. Yes, he sucked up a lot of the attention. If you're prone to hate Dusty Rhodes, you probably hated this match because he was a glory hog the entire time. Yes, Dusty had a ginormous fucking ego. You good? You done complaining about it? Great. Now we can talk about the segment. Not to say there was a whole lot to take away from the match itself. You know, a lot of the psychology here was Butch Reed trying to use dirty tactics behind Dusty's back. A lot of jaw-jacking going on with those two at various points. If you're not a fan of 5-minute sleeper hold spots, you probably could have skipped past the heat portion of the match. But we get down to the end where Reed goes to shoot Dog off. In the most telegraphed rev bump spot of all time, Dusty is standing right in the line of fire when Dog mows him down. And that also led to the most cringeworthy spot of the whole segment. As the Anvil comes down to try to run interference, Bill Watts is constantly referring to him here as Neidhart. That's Neidhart. Neidhart's getting in the ring. Dusty Rhodes cuts off Neidhart. Down goes Neidhart. And I'm listening to him. I'm like, am I having a stroke? Or have they always referred to this guy as Jim Neidhart since the day he debuted? Why the fuck is Bill Watts all of a sudden calling him Neidhart? Is that like a Hacksaw Dugan accent where he just can't pronounce the guy's name correctly no matter how hard he tries? I have no idea. Because like I said, it makes no sense. They've been referring to him as Neidhart since he showed up. I mean, at least with Duggan, I can make an excuse for that because Bill Watts has always called him Dugan. I just figured that was an accent. But like, no, I can go back and look at the tapes. They have called him Jim Neidhart since the day he showed up. So once I got over that, Dog ends up giving Reed the thump. Dusty does the best leap of faith I've ever seen as he jumps over Dog's body to go to the cover. And he gets in position. Dusty counts 1. He counts 2. And he counts 3. And we now officially have a new North American champion here. No bogus stipulations or curveballs. Dog is the certified North American champion. And yet again, Boyd Pierce lied to the fans by pointing out Dog's great physique. I respond with, fuck off, Boyd. But yeah, pretty fun match overall. Yes, they did essentially just do a 2-week theme storyline on television to basically get the belt back on JYD again. Again, if you're pro not to like the idea of Junkyard Dog getting pounded down your throat, now this probably rubbed you the wrong way a little bit. I didn't have a problem with it per se. You know, they're obviously setting up the story that Nikolai Volkov is part of the title picture now, so you can at least kind of map out what Watts wants to do with the big main event feud in the future. And even though Magnum's title reign was very short-lived, I mean, you look at the whole direction of where he took Magnum in the last couple weeks, making him a focal point of the television show. You really see that Watts had big plans for him as we head into 84. So I liked all this. I had no problem with it. I did, however, have a problem with the Missing Link versus Magnum TA. Mostly in that it sucked because the Missing Link was involved. At least it was short. Oh, one thing I didn't mention about the opening monologue, when Watts was covering the story of how the North American title had to get stripped again, there was a Magnum pre-tape where he talked about how it only takes 3 seconds for him to hit his belly-to-belly finish. So they kind of carried that story over into this match. The missing link tried to go up top for a big dive, but Magnum cut him off at the pass and drove him down with the belly-to-belly. And Watts did put over that talking point. It only takes 3 seconds. So again, great attention to detail. Beyond that, nothing to add. And then we had Nikolai Volkov going over Jerry Oates. Slightly more competitive squash than what we're used to seeing in Nikolai squashes. But he still went over rather convincingly. The bigger note here was the giant stack of wheat that Nikolai had in his corner before the match. Which, by the way, never actually played into the finish. It was not a gimmick that he used to bash Jerry over the head with it to win. I mean, Watts kind of explained the rationale behind Volkov having a giant bag of weed at ringside. I think it was one of those insider references that only people following the Carter administration would know anything about. I mean, without completely boring you with political talk here, I can't remember what year it was. I mean, my historical knowledge past the 80s is very limited. I know it was between the years 1976 and 1980 because that was Carter's 4-year term as president. Basically, Carter put a stop to the Soviet Union being able to buy U.S. wheat to harvest their crops. It was called the grain embargo. I think it was in response to the Afghanistan invasion, because obviously we were one of the allied parties with Afghanistan during that period, along with like a dozen other countries. So, yeah, we were kind of pissed when Russia got involved with all that. But the point is, the whole thing was a backfire flop on American farmers because the sanctions that Carter put in place basically dropped the price of grain to the point where the farmers weren't making any profit off of it. In fact, they were actually losing profit. Didn't matter to the Soviets because fuck it, right? I mean, we can't get our supplies from the U.S. We'll just get it from other importers. So they didn't really lose much, despite Carter thinking the Russian people would starve. That's basically it. Just another thing to check off on the laundry list of the epic failure that was the Carter administration. And how Reagan wound up winning 2 back-to-back landslide elections from 80 to 88. Among other reasons. So yeah. There's your history lesson, kids. Don't vote Democrat. That's a lesson. I'm just kidding. I don't give a shit who you vote for. I know who I'm voting for, but doesn't mean he's saving the West from its imminent demise. Nor is the opposition. There's a very famous person that I know coined the phrase, enjoy the decline. So that took us to Tom Stanton versus the Iceman King Parsons. Hell yeah, dude. A King Parsons appearance in Mid-South. Cool seeing him outside the Dallas region for a change. It wasn't all good news for the entire segment, though. When they were panning to the crowd during Iceman's entrance, you could see a vast overflow of empty chairs in the front 2 rows. I don't know if they were just coming up on the end of a taping block or what, but it was very noticeable. I thought it was cool how Watts brought up the Iceman's backstory a little bit here. How he actually came to get the nickname Iceman. I'm pretty sure that's something Bill Mercer talked about a few years ago when we saw the Iceman in Dallas for the first time. Basically, when he was in school, he worked as an ice picker for a factory, and he was so popular with the college kids on campus, everybody just started nicknaming him the Iceman. And if you remember, I mean, this is going way back in the time machine, there were actually vignettes of the Iceman with a giant set of tongs. Remember, he was like picking up the giant ice cube blocks and then breaking them over concrete. It was so campy. But I remember that shit. I truthfully don't remember a lot about Dallas footage over the last couple years. At least offhand. But I certainly remember the Iceman throwing around giant ice cubes on television. And he was very popular amongst the Midsouth fans. They popped for a lot of his stuff here. I mean, it was all the classic shucking and jiving we come to know King Parsons for. Really nothing that innovative. The ending in particular was great because he gives Stan his finishing hip attack. The move that Mercer always refers to as the butt. Watch this out where he goes. I don't even know what you would call a move like that. Made you want to pick up the phone and have Watts give Bill Mercer a call. I would have loved to have heard that conversation. Watch this goes. He calls it the what now? The butt? Correct. Because he uses both sides of his butt. Not just one side. Could have named it anything else. I mean, I guess it's politically incorrect to say something like, the Iceman giving Tom Stan a handful of that chunky ass. I don't think that would fly on television. It flies in my book. So what else do we have going on this week? Great question. Glad you asked. We had a completely forgettable tag squash with Jim the Anvil Neidhart and Bob Duncombe versus Mike Bond and Marty Oates. Who the fuck booked this match? Oh, to be fair, Hacksaw Reed competed earlier. Guess it made sense that they would have Neidhart teaming with somebody else this week. Here's a scary thought. God, I didn't even realize this until I looked it up. So for the uninformed, there were actually two Bobby Duncombe's in wrestling. There was the original Bobby Duncombe Sr., who wrestled for the WWF as far back as the late 60s. Bruno's era. And that was the guy that was actually wrestling here, believe it or not. There was also his son, Bobby, who had a very short-lived wrestling career in the mid to late 90s. I think he only wrestled for maybe like 5 or 6 years before he retired. Well, anyway, guess which one is still alive? Yeah. Bobby Duncombe Sr. Still alive today. He is... I think I read on his wiki page he's like 80 now. Yeah, Bobby Duncombe Jr. is unfortunately no longer with us. He died of a drug overdose in early 2000. Early 30s. Damn shame. God, that's got to be the worst thing you have to fear as a parent. Having to bury your own child. I mean, not to get too philosophical, but I mean, no parent should ever have to go through something like that. And trust me, my family's been through it. Relatives, not anybody in my immediate family, but it's tough. It's really tough. I don't think you ever truly really get over it, you know? So anyway, Neidhart and Duncan won. Again, very forgettable match. I think they were just kind of looking for an excuse to get the Anvil on TV this week. We also had a standby with King Cobra and Doug Vines with about 2 minutes left of airtime. This kind of served more as a recap segment for Watts than anything, touching on everything we saw earlier with Dog and Reed, promoting a couple things for next week's card as well. The only thing I wrote down here was, this might have been the only time in history I've seen anybody go over with a head scissors takeover. But that is how King Cobra won this match. He gave Vines a head scissors out of the corner, grapevine the leg, and he pinned him. You could tell how ecstatic Bill was calling that match on the program, because he even gave us the good old hand wave as they sent us off air and pitch of the credits. Big old smile on his face. Good shit, man. It's always fun when Bill Watts is in a good mood. But you know, it's like I always talk about with Midsouth. Not every show's a banger, but they always give you plenty to talk about with each program. Even those buffer episodes that don't have a whole lot going on outside a bunch of squash matches. But this week was very story heavy. You know, we're still not quite at the peak epicness of Mid-South television that we'll get to in the next year. But we are getting there. Slowly by surely. Got a lot of new names popping up. And man, we're only really scratching the surface of some of the names yet to come. But we at least now have a validated North American champion. Yes, it is the Junkyard Dog. It's not necessarily breaking any new ground creatively. But then again, when you think about it contextually, Dog is really only around Mid-South for, what, 10 or so months? Not even a full year. So if you already have JYD fatigue by now, well, you won't have to deal with it for much longer. We will just leave it at that. So, with World Class, yeah, remember last week when I got all bent out of shape that they just withheld the hair match footage from Texas Stadium? My assumption being that they just weren't going to ever air the tape. So they aired the tape. That was my queef machine going on in the backdrop in case you didn't hear that. So now I regret everything I said the other week. I was so angry. I'm serious, dude. I was convinced they weren't ever going to air the footage. I mean, it's crazy to think. You know, they aired 2 consecutive weeks of Cotton Bowl footage. The only match they never aired was the hair match with Yvonne Erichs versus Gino Hernandez and Chris Adams. When they started last week from the Sportatorium, I was like, these motherfuckers aren't going to show the tape. They're just going to mosey on into the next set of tapings. Well, I jumped the gun a little bit. They did air the hair match. They just made us wait an extra week for whatever reason. I don't know. I guess to really make us want it. So that was the main event this week. It was actually more than half the fucking show. I could just skip right to it, but I do want to talk about the other couple things they aired. Not the least of which was the return of Rick Rude. Only this time he was sporting more of his traditional ravishing Rick Rude gimmick we would come to love him for. He was in action against Tommy Montana. Or Montana. Let me try that again. Tommy Montana. Say that 11 times fast. And yet again, Rick Rude was sporting these zebra pant leggings. He also wore those same pants the previous week, so pretty sure they just taped 2 of his matches back to back. Which is a real testament to Rude's cardio. God. Wrestling 2 matches in back-to-back succession. He was noticeably sweatier here than normal. So I have to imagine they taped this match right after they taped the first one. But it was kind of a similar deal as the match they had last week. He went over with his signature DDT. They are still promoting Percy Pringle as his manager, which Rude kind of talked about in his post-match promo. After putting over that the Dallas fans smell awful. He talked about how Percy Pringle III will be in Dallas soon. He had to stress the third. He is currently tying up some loose ends in Florida, which is why we haven't seen him yet. Who the hell did Percy manage in Florida? Why don't I remember that? Not that I would expect anybody to remember the stuff Percy did outside WWF as Undertaker's manager. That was sort of his bread and butter for his wrestling career. But yeah, it's weird. I don't remember Percy doing anything in the CWF. Maybe an expert would be able to chime in and help me out. I could look it up myself, but, you know, I'm lazy. So then we come back for Mr. Hollywood John Tatum versus Rick McCord, with the lovely Missy Hyatt at ringside in Tatum's corner. By the way, just curious, is there any other less intimidating ring name somebody can have than McCord? He just thought, I'll settle on McCord as the last name. That sounds really threatening. Yeah, about as threatening as McCord's bleach blonde dye job. Even Mercer pointed out that it was the Battle of the Blondes here. And the hot blonde was at ringside. He didn't actually say that. I mean, the match is okay, but the people were mostly cheering for Sunshine throughout the whole match. They wanted to see her come down and gouge Missy's eyes out. It is basically the same exact story they were doing with Jimmy Garvin and Chris Adams last year. Also kind of the same scenario at play where the two guys were always subordinate to the real highlight of the entire feud. That being the valets, Sunshine and Precious. It was always one thing I talked about when I reviewed their matches. It was like no matter how hard Garvin and Adams tried to have great wrestling matches, people didn't give a shit. They just wanted to see a catfight break out. Now, of course, this was back when women actually drew in wrestling to an extent. But we're not supposed to say that. But it's a similar boat we're in right now where you got Scott Casey and John Tatum doing the bulk of the work for the feud. But everybody's just kind of waiting around to see Sunshine and Missy go at it. Not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just kind of pointing out the obvious. So Tatum won with a Gore Buster. The fans did not, in fact, see Sunshine and Missy go at it here, so they were justifiably disappointed. We'll have to wait until next time. But let us get to the real meat of this week's show. At long last, the match. Kerry and Kevin Von Erich versus Gino Hernandez and Chris Adams. The losing team getting their head shaved. And in order to ensure that neither team is able to escape after the bout is settled, the ringside is surrounded by 20 lumberjacks, babyfaces and heels alike, as well as like a quarter of the fucking Dallas population, ironically enough. Can't stress enough how jam-packed that building was. This is a blood feud that's been going on for, well, as a matter of fact, well over a year now. Chris Adams actually cut a promo beforehand, telling Kevin that the only difference between the outcome this year versus last year's Cotton Bowl event is that Kevin will be leaving on a stretcher with a bald head this time. And if you actually remember last year's event, pretty significant moment in world-class history, that was the match where Chris leveled Kevin in the back of the head with a folding chair and then sent him to the hospital with a concussion. Kevin left a bloody, mangled mess. Pretty substantial heat angle to do, especially on a Texas Stadium show in front of that hot crowd. Took a lot of balls. So that was actually a good story detail here. It's kind of easy to forget that happened. I mean, it's only been a year, but... So there was a lot to cover here. I do want to at least start the recap by pointing out the obvious, especially if you've kind of been following along with the world-class coverage throughout the last year. One of the biggest things I always kind of go back to, we've seen well over a dozen Kerry and Kevin versus Gino and Chris tag matches, many of which have resulted in some kind of DQ or count out. So, to be fair, it's not like they've been trading falls back and forth 50-50 for the last 12 months. And that would have been ridiculous. It would have killed the feud. With that all said, it has gotten somewhat repetitive in terms of seeing the same match over and over again. Plus, it's not really taking into account all the singles matches we've seen these guys have. Getting that minor gripe out of the way, I was going to say major gripe, but it's really not. This was all built around finality. The heels were the ones that introduced the barber shears a while back. They have been going around cutting the babyface's hair on television for months. Eventually, you had to know that this was going to be the way they capped off the program. And you know, while the match was definitely back and forth for a lot of it, the crowd was super into it from bell to bell. They were hanging on to every near fall, thinking that at any point here the heels could lose and have to get their heads shaved. There was a lot of drama. Well, yeah, I don't really know if the Dallas fans suspended disbelief long enough to ever think that Kevin and Kerry would actually get their heads shaved. But they added enough suspense here to where the heels had the babyfaces in a couple major pinning predicaments throughout. There were some funny moments when the heels were trying to cheat behind David Manning's back. You know, doing the old switcheroo deal without making tags. The best one was when Kelly Kiniski was talking to David, telling him, "Oh, yeah, they definitely tagged." Right. Because we obviously could take Kelly Kiniski's word as the gospel truth. Of course the heels tagged. Why would he ever lie? But again, you know, a lot of the match was the standard stuff you'd come to expect with big-profile Dallas matches. The Von Erichs are always over, regardless of the circumstance. I could probably go the rest of my life never having to see another discus punch from Kerry as long as I live. Because they always look like dog shit. But the people go nuts for it. So who am I to bitch? But of course, the ending is what everybody's mainly wanting to see, so may as well talk about that, plus the fallout. So they do the powder in the eyes deal to Kerry, which temporarily blinds him. Meanwhile, the heels are ganging up on Kevin. But Lance Von Erich comes over with a bottle of water to help clear Kerry's eyes. And when the heels miss the powder spot on Kevin, and Gino accidentally blinded Chris instead, they allowed for Kerry to scoop Chris Adams from underneath and schoolboy him for the 1-2-3. Big pop, as you would expect. God, looking back at that finish, I don't think there was a single human being sitting. Everybody was on their feet for that. And naturally, Gino and Chris immediately try to gun it afterwards, but all the lumberjacks are kind of there to snag them and restrain them both. So they come back from break. You get Gino being held back on the floor while all the top babyfaces are tying Chris up over the table. And this was kind of cathartic with the way they did this. You know, all the babyfaces are taking turns cutting off patches of Chris's hair and then throwing him into the crowd. Sort of plays into the story where Gino and Chris went around for months cutting off individual babyfaces' hair. So everybody got a modicum of revenge. Scott Casey was out there. The Iceman was out there. Brian Adias. A couple other names I forgot to jot down. But then Kerry broke out the electric clippers and started going to town on Chris. He got most of Chris's head. He actually kind of looked like Larry Fine by the end of it, where he had no hair on the top, but like the outer regions of his hair were still intact. So, Chris did manage to escape. Then they kind of switched gears and hoisted Gino up into the ring to get him restrained in the chair. They actually had Chris Von Erich tackle Gino on the floor as he tried to escape the first time. This fucking 5-foot-something scrawny kid just comes out of nowhere and barrels over Gino with like a linebacker. It was the funniest goddamn thing. And, lather, rinse, repeat. They get poor Gino trapped in the chair long enough for Kerry to shave his head. And like, I mean, you watch the segment on television, it does everything justice because the viewing audience at home can actually see what's going on because the camera crew's like right there on top of it. I just thought about it from the perspective of everybody in the arena. There was no possible way anybody could see the head shaving in progress, right? I mean, you had 50-something people around ringside, 20-something guys in the ring surrounding Gino and Chris in the chair the whole time. I mean, unless you were watching from the upper deck or like the nosebleed section of the stadium, like how the hell were you supposed to even tell what was going on? And like even by the time Gino and Chris ran out of the ring, they had towels draped over their heads in like 5 seconds. So that must have sucked for the people that paid tickets for the event. Obviously, this is way before they had Jumbotrons. So it's not like you could look up at a giant screen and then watch everything in full. I mean, I guess if you were watching everything on tape delay, well, you saw the whole angle here. But there you have it. The hair match payoff. Was it worth the wait? Hey, you know what? Credit to them. They did not false advertise. So, yeah. I'd say it was worth the wait. I mean, again, the whole selling point was getting to see the heels get their comeuppance for all the hell they put the locker room through for the better part of the last how many months. And now the question is, how do Chris and Gino show their faces in the Dallas area again? With their freshly shaved skulls, craniums, cue balls. Something tells me we're going to be breaking out the classic mask angle. Not the face mask, like the lucha masks. or some way to conceal the evidence. But I'm just spitballing. I don't actually know what they do. So there's your payoff. Good second half to the show. And the match, like I said, it was a long match, but it was never boring. All action. Crowd was white hot. I mean, that was the first and only time on the entire Texas Stadium card from the footage we've seen where it actually came off like a main event feel. And that wasn't the case for the majority of that Cotton Bowl card. Because all those other matches were lame as fuck. Maybe discount the Fantastics match with John Tatum and whoever the other guy was. I already forgot. That Dave Peterson guy, I think. But that was more about the angle than anything with Sunshine and Missy Hyatt afterwards. And the match itself, who gives a shit? But yeah, everything else on that card really wasn't all that great. But that's in the past. And they're obviously gearing up for a couple more Star Wars events to close out the year. We'll see what the landscape holds as we get ready to transition into the year 1986. And that is kind of where world class is about to take a turn for the worse. We've already seen some red flags break out throughout 85. It's kind of been on a downhill slope. But 86 is where it really becomes noticeable that things are not good for the company's future. Once that NWA withdrawal happened, it was all over. But we'll cover all that in due time. So, thanks everybody for tuning in. And we'll be coming back this Monday for Retro Raw and this Crown Jewel event. Question is, will I watch the whole thing? That is indeed the $1 million question. We'll see. It depends on how long the show is. If it's coming up on 4 hours, I might need to cut ties somewhere. And I think I already know which matches I'm skipping out on, so stay tuned for that. But I'll try to do my best to cover the bulk of the card. Again, I don't know what the start time is for it. I mean, for a Saudi show, you have to figure that's going to be noon Eastern here in the States, right? I'm not going to look it up now. I'll figure it out later. But anyway, thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll catch you all soon. Peace out.